All right, I have 7 o'clock.
Let's do it. Mute us.
Howard, I'm not seeing Jasper. Let's see here. Okay, well, we'll hope he joins us here shortly.
No, I haven't been in touch, but he knows, doesn't he? You've been in touch with him, I take it.
No, there he is.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. All right, everybody's on mute. Let's get this party started.
Morning.
Welcome, everybody. Let's do this official. Well, welcome. Let's run through the group here. And Jasper, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Looks like you know the tricks to Zoom, so the whole space bar will toggle the mute option. And let me run through some faces here and see if I can't find any visiting Rotarians or guests. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Looks good. So I wanted to do a quick Venmo demonstration. I think some of you have asked how you could use the app. So you can see my, actually, I don't know if you could see my phone, but there's a search function. And when you select it, there's a scan code function, which is why I put the code on the screen so that when you do scan it, all you have to do is put your camera up to the code. It will, if you're not friends with us already, bring up the Rotary Club of Arcata Sunrise option, and you can pay $5, which I'll do right now. And that'll enter you in for this week's raffle prize, which is a $25 gift certificate from Vanessa there at the Griffin. I really like the idea of looking to support our local members who are small business owners, and so she'll definitely get $25 or more, depending on how many entries we get here for the raffle. And if nobody wins the blue ball, then that gets compounded into the following week with the next week's prize, and that pot can also grow and be also a donation to our contribution to our local small business owner. So that's the strategy behind this new change on the raffle. And please go ahead and enter in so we can not only have some fun, but support our fellow members here. Any questions out there? Nope. So Thomas, let me give you an opportunity here, if you're out there, to give us a little update. Let's see here.
We're gonna have to go get him out of bed, I think.
Oh, okay. So next week, we'll get you next week, Thomas.
He might come down before the meeting's over. Who knows?
Okay, sounds good. So we'll go through some recognitions here. I threw out an email to ask for some coworkers, and so this is my coworker. He's a 14-year-old lab cross, Zeke, and he sits by me sometimes when we're doing the meeting. So I'd love to see photos of your fellow coworkers. So send in those photos, send them directly to me. That'd be awesome, and we'll have some fun here. And of course, there's Amy. And then I did get a photo. Oh no, I did want to recognize Scott for winning Rotary last week. That was an amazing background. Hard to beat there. So I think I am trying to dream up something behind me to match that, but we'll see. I'm sure that took quite some time and quite a lot of work. Ed did. Oh, go ahead.
I can loan it to you anytime you want it. Just bring a truck.
That would be fun. Yes. I wrote. It looks quite large. I don't know if it would fit back here, but we'll give it a try. Ed did send me his work environment, and that's quite a few screens. So thank you, Ed. That's a little nuts out there. I'm sure there's a use for all of those things. I don't know if you care to share. 2 keyboards even.
Well, there's 2 computers, so they need 2 keyboards.
Amy and I are sharing this workspace, so I actually do have 2 keyboards myself and 2 mice. But so send in those photos. This is a lot of fun. We're going around town, and this is how we're gonna see each other wearing masks. So I thought we'd play a little game with the chat feature to see if you wanted to guess who is behind the mask. And if I see the answer in the chat screen, yeah, I'll go to the next one. So thanks, Lori. That was a reveal. And how about this one? Here we go. That is Miss Amy. Who's got this one? Yeah.
Charlie.
Lori's got getting them all, or first to answer at least. Got another
Background
Charlie.
giving us our way.
Yeah. Tammy. Look at those blues. There we go. A couple more. Haha. We got a double one here. You got to get both. Yeah. Sweet. Thanks for playing. Send in those photos as well. I had to mine Facebook for some of those, but that is how we're going to try to recognize each other as we go around town. So along that vein, Susan Diehl-McCarthy is going to make some masks with our RCAS logo on them. And she is looking for some virtual volunteers to help her make these masks. So either in the chat, or if you want to send Susan a message, she would definitely could use some help. Susan, if you want to say anything. You have to hold the space bar down. I muted everybody. Like, there we go.
I got it. My space bar wasn't working for some reason. Anyway, so yes, I should have the material next week. I just ordered it Monday, I think. And anybody who wants to help make masks, I've got a great pattern, unless you've got your own. And I can send it to you, or we can just collaborate online. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So I found, I sent out this email on Wednesday, and there might have been some confusion, so I just thought I'd run through it. So since we're not using Plaza Grill for the remaining of the year, there are some leftover meeting fee costs. We collect this $90 of it when dues are paid, and because it's not going towards the space, let's see here, let me do some muting. Since it's not going towards the space, we can either have it carry over to next year, or I'm asking to see if you'd be willing to donate it to the club. What we'd like to do with the funds is to perhaps support our local small business owners as well as club members, and see if we can't maybe purchase some of their services or products for either use now or later, for a fundraiser perhaps down the road, but as a way to support them through this difficult time since everybody is in shelter in place and shut down. So I did send out a Google form. I believe I fixed it so you could use any email address So I just want to know how you feel about that, and if you could please respond, that'll help us. In a couple weeks, we'll have a board meeting and talk about how we can leverage these funds. So any thoughts or questions out there? No. Okay. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. I thought this would be fun too. We have this, there's a bingo game. I can email this to you all, but fun things to do to also support all local businesses. So write Google reviews, or check in or connect with someone, donate some food, simple thank you, all great things that we can do. So I don't know if we want to play a game and offer a prize to the person who can fill out this bingo card sooner than later. I think that would be fun recognition for next week. So I will, at the end of this meeting, get this out so you can have some fun out there in the community, and let me know how things go. Ray, did you make it this week? Are you out there? Let me check the photos really quick here. Not seeing them. No. Okay. Well, I did want to recognize Siva. Looks like she made a donation to Miranda's Rescue, which was very thoughtful and amazing. I mean, she's always doing some great things out there at Hensel's. So I just want to throw some recognition out there to her. I'm not sure if she made it here this morning. But small business doing some great things out there. And if you do have other recognitions, please send them in, either to myself or the arcs.recognitions@gmail. So Andreas, I don't know if you want to rehash the stimulus check challenge. I did want to narrow down that. So last week I shared that our foundation has fallen short just because we're not having the spring fundraiser, and I want to narrow down if you were able to donate your stimulus check to the club, it would go to mainly support backpacks for kids, because that is a food need in our community, and then the rest, depending on how much comes through, could be is a donation to, again, addressing a food need through Food for People. Andreas, I don't know if you have more you'd want to share.
No, that's pretty much the challenge. It's whatever you can spare with your stimulus check whenever you get it. Trying to make up the lost revenue from the spring fundraiser so that we can be sure to maintain backpacks for kids through next year. And then anything above that goes to local food banks for immediate pandemic needs.
Yes. So thank you in advance if you do consider that. Yeah, so backpacks for kids. So in the event we have some guests who don't know what that is, we previously created bags that are food bags for kids to take home. So they have some food for over the weekend. And so that practice is still continuing just with even those schools out. That way they can continue to have sustenance through the weekend. Some upcoming events. So on that same note, this is now today, because I looked this up yesterday, from 2 to 4. They don't need volunteers, but they are hosting a drive up food donation drive, or distribution, sorry. And so if you know anybody who could use this food, you can send them to the address down at the bottom of Bayshore Way, and they can drive through and pick up a bag of food. So just wanted to put it out there that if you know anybody who's in this space, that there's a place for them to go drive up, because to make it easy to avoid encourage distancing, to avoid contact, that there's a distribution today from 2 to 4. And then it's going to highlight the 2 events. So Howl for Humboldt County Healthcare Workers, 8 p.m. It's cool to see the Facebook posts. I think there's some neighborhoods that are pretty eager to participate. We did it one night and feel like we were the only ones out there howling at the moon. Anybody having some fun out there with this?
Yeah, I've been howling over at Tom's house or outside his house, and but last night I stayed home, and there's lots of howlies in my neighborhood now, so that's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun to hear.
We started howling on Jacob Creek Road, and now we have the whole neighborhood howling at 8 p.m. every day.
That's awesome.
We started doing it on Graham Road, and then finally we can hear everybody over on Howard Street on the so it resonates the whole valley.
It's awesome.
Nice.
Thank you guys for sharing. Janice shared with me the Feed the ER program that started to help our healthcare workers who are working long hours and having a hard time getting out. So there's a Venmo set up for them as well. If you want to support getting them access to a quick meal in between shifts or while they're out there, putting their lives at risk, an option for you there. There's a Facebook page that you can join and kind of see what they're doing to support our local healthcare workers as well.
Hey, Hefe, can I jump in on that one?
Sure.
My daughter's working with that group, and they are also going to a lot of the local restaurants. Like they talked to Bill Chino and Tomo's, and those they're buying the meals and then taking them, so they're supporting the restaurants as well. And so they've got restaurants, but they're short is some donation. So if anybody wants to put any money towards that, but they're trying to do it twofold, supporting the restaurants as well as the healthcare workers.
Nice. Thanks, Tom. And I saw this, Bob, I don't know if you'd like to elaborate on this Curbside Community Care Day. Looks like Shady Lady's involved.
All right, yeah, it was off and now it's back on again. So tomorrow from noon to 2, it's a little curbside thing. We put together a little craft project for kids kind of prior to Easter. So evidently the Easter Bunny is going to show up for this event. Drive by, everything will be nice and clean, and just a little quick pickup to give kids something different to do at home.
Do you have a mask for the Easter Bunny?
There's more than a mask.
Thanks, Bob.
You bet. Thank you.
And Maggie, do you want to talk about the virtual firesides for next week?
Yeah, so thanks for reminding me. I was so busy working on that survey that I forgot I was working on this. Next week, no, it's a week after next. Well, it doesn't matter now. I don't know when they're going to happen, but I had originally scheduled firesides for the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. And and Julie and Scott and Lisa and Chris were going to host these at their homes, and we're obviously not doing that. So I will probably set up Zoom meetings on those 3 evenings that people can sign up and pick which one they want to attend. And we'll just basically have a little chat about what's going on, what we're looking for next year, getting your ideas. It's a little unusual, what we're dealing with, obviously, not a little, it's a lot unusual. So this will be first time for everything. But in preparation for that, I'm going to be sending out a survey probably over this weekend to ask you to respond to that. So I have some data, I have some information from you in advance. So when you see that come to you, please take, it takes about, I think, maybe 5 minutes to fill it out. So please do that and send it back, and then I'll have that information for us all to look at during the fireside if people want to see it. So, and I think I will still do these in the evening unless people want to do them in the morning. Normally they're after work, but yeah, I think a lot of us are still working, I think. So I think I'll probably still do them around 6 o'clock. So any questions about that?
So I guess I'll throw out the last Friday of the month is the 24th, which is why I thought that would be a final Friday. So we will have a meeting next week. Ignore this thing at the top of the screen. And but we won't have a meeting the week of the fireside. So that'll be the 24th. And our final Friday for April will fall on May 1st. So I'll send out some reminders here shortly. But sorry for the confusion there.
AJ, you want to give another little explanation of firesides for anyone who's not familiar?
Sure. So each incoming president gets a chance to sit down with smaller groups of the club, and it's an opportunity for you to talk about some of the things that are important to you when being part of a Rotary Club. And there's some traditions and some things that we do on a regular basis that help us raise money and help support the community. And it's an opportunity for you to share your ideas in how we can either enhance those functions or bring some new ideas so we can do more with what we have available to us. And then I'm imagining there's going to be a new component going into this next year, considering our kind of new situation. But it is an opportunity to share your thoughts and then hear more from your other club members about the different things that are happening with the club. So I know Maggie's got a direction, and she would just definitely appreciate your feedback in going into our next year. So get your bid paddles ready. I guess I'll make this change as well. That'll be the 1st of May for Final Friday. And we'll have our first live virtual auction. So we'll have some fun there. So Jasper, I'll turn it over to you as our host. Howard, I don't know if you'd like to do an introduction for us.
Yes, I'd be glad to. Jasper has quite a reputation for international work. He's a professor over at HSU. Jasper, is it in the geology department?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. And he has quite a reputation. I've been hearing about him and his projects, and then I was able to connect with him last year, and he's graciously going to tell us about his water irrigation project in Peru. So we all thank you, Jasper, for being here to tell us about this.
Okay, good morning, and thank you all for listening. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I have a presentation that we'll go through. Okay, so here we're looking, and we're going to be talking about today, is a project that we've been working on for 2 years in the Peruvian Andes near Cusco. And so I'm working with Margaret Lang, she's in the engineering department here at Humboldt State, and then Professor Christina Keating from Rutgers, and then graduate students both at Humboldt State and at University of Michigan. So our project, this picture here is looking at the upper part of the watershed that we're studying called the Ramachaka. I'll go into a little bit of detail about the Ramachaka shortly. So the project really has these three interconnected themes that are, and the project is funded by Geosciences Without Borders. We called it Bonanza in Los Andes, and here the bonanza, the boon is water. And the three interconnected themes, the first is the benefit to the community. So we are collaborating with the community of Zurite to build irrigation canals, and those were actually recently completed in the last month. About 1.5 kilometers of irrigation canals to benefit over 100 families. And the second goal of our project is the geoscience. So studying this upper watershed to understand fluxes of water into and out of the watershed. And then the third is the mentorship of students and connecting students from different parts of the world. So we're working with Peruvian scientists and Peruvian geologists. They're based in both Cusco and Lima as a part of our project. So it's really important, this integration and connection of ideas between students in the US and students in Peru. And thus far, we've had over 30 students have been part of our project in the last 2 years. We've taken 3 separate trips to the community of Zurite. And this picture on the bottom is showing some of the people involved with our project, students, leaders in the community, and then also host families that are gracious and host us in their homes while we're working in Zurite. So this icon just down at the bottom right there, we did a podcast through the Society of Exploration Geophysicists, and they're the ones who are funding the Geoscientists Without Borders in our project. So that podcast called the Seismic Sound Off goes into a little bit more detail about our program. So if you want to learn more, you can check that out. So let's go back here and think about the broader picture of the Peruvian Andes. So this picture on the right here shows these 3 major biomes, and these are biomes that exist above the permanent tree line or at the limits of the permanent tree line up to the permanent snow line. So along the spine of the Andes at the limitation of where vegetation can grow. And we're focused here on the Puna, which is less studied than the Jalca or the Paramo that exists further to the north. And the Puna is important because it's the source of headwater streams throughout a lot of the Andes. So you may have heard that glaciers in the Andean region are melting, and as these glaciers melt, more of those upland areas will turn into these Puna landscapes, like I've shown this picture here on the right. And so understanding the hydrology of these upland systems is important for water security in the region. And it is already important for water security for places as large as Cusco, so almost 4,500,000 people, and 80% of their water is derived from these Puna grasslands. So that star there shows the location, approximate location of Cusco and Zurite. So Zurite is about an hour north of Cusco, and it's a farming community shown in this Google Earth image here. Here's Zurite. There's about 4,000 people who live there. It's constructed on, this is the alluvial fan of debris that's fallen out of the mountains here and built up this gently sloping area where they have lots of agricultural plots, and then there's a flatland, an old lake that the Spanish actually drained, which is the Anta Plain below. And you'll see a picture of that in a minute. So Zurite and the surrounding fields are at an elevation of about 3,400 meters, and there's incredible relief, so about 1 kilometer of relief or more right behind Zurite. And so the source of water for much of the agricultural needs and then also municipal needs of Zurite comes from this upper Ramachaka watershed. And our study site is outlined here in blue, so up at the top part of this watershed. And then this darker blue shows a diversion canal where they have taken water from the Ramachaka and they're using it to irrigate in this most intensively agricultural section of Zurite. And so this upper part, this is our study site, this 2.14 kilometer squared watershed. And if you were to stand on San Cristobal, which is this high peak, and look back out across the Anta Plain. So now we're going to change our frame of reference where we're looking out across Zurite in the field below. It would look like this. So there you can see, for reference, Zarite in the far right, and we're looking in the direction of Cusco. So Cusco is beyond these mountains here in the distance. This is the Anta Plain below. So this checkerboard of green fields during the wet season. And so we're in the southern hemisphere here, and the wet season is the primary growing season. But because this is in the tropics, there's lots of solar radiation that would also in the winter season. So they grow things year round. And the thing that changes between the wet and the dry season is the availability of water. So if we look at the contrast here, same angle looking down the Anta, this is what it looks like during the dry season. And so there's a need for moisture or irrigation water in order to grow things during the dry season. And what do they grow here? Well, they grow wheat, they grow corn and potatoes. Those are the three biggest crops, but then they also grow alfalfa for animals, quinoa, onions, and other smaller types of vegetables. And this plot here was made by one of the students who was involved in our program, shows precipitation throughout the year. So there's about 700 millimeters annually that falls, and that's this blue line here. And then these bars show the water needs for each of the different types of crops during the year. So during the wet season, when they grow corn, they need to irrigate a little bit, but because the rainfall is high, they don't have a strong need for irrigation as they do during the dry season, where they're primarily growing fava beans, but then also potatoes. And there's no rain that's falling, and so there's a much higher need for irrigation. So we think of this system from the Upper Ramas Chaco watershed down to Zarite is connecting the water that falls in this falls as rain and not as snow in the Upper Ramas Chaco watershed. The ecosystem that moderates the storage and flow of that water downstream is the watershed itself, and then people downstream are using this water. And so in Zarite, we could think of this water ecosystem people as a microcosm of what's happening in the Andean region, where these Puna landscapes are important for downstream water users. And this is our ecosystem. This is a picture of the upper part of the Ramas Chaco watershed. And then downstream, this is what the agricultural fields look like. Here's mustard, but there's canals that crisscross the agricultural fields that bring water to grow crops. And so we want to know what the water yield is from this Upper Ramas Chaco watershed. And if we blow up that picture here, this is looking at that upper part of the watershed, beautiful landscape, and it's divided. It has structure to it. So the grasslands here, the whole ecosystem is called Puna, but then the grasses themselves are all called Puna grasses. So there's grasses going on the hill slopes, and then in these lower, these low gradient basins up on the upper part of the watershed, they're called bofedales. And so these are peatlands that are seasonally saturated, but are always humid. And so we're understanding that they're very important for storing and releasing water and sustaining flow in the Ramas Chaco watershed. So a primary scientific question we're asking is, where is water stored in this landscape between the hill slopes and the bofedales? And I included this in here. We've been using a variety of different techniques, but one of the tools that we're using are drones. And so we've used drones to map the upper watershed and create digital elevation models. And so here, this is showing a drone flight by one of our student pilots from last summer. So we had a drill crew up there who was installing a well to monitor the groundwater table, and then flying over here, you can see just what the upper parts of the watershed looks like. This is during the dry season. In this grid network here that you can see on the hill slopes, they've planted some trees up here to prevent against erosion. So there's been landslides that have occurred in the upper part of this watershed, and these trees are to help stabilize the hill slopes. Okay, so some initial results from our study thus far, we found that of the precipitation that comes in, we measure that to be 700 millimeters. There's about 500 millimeters that runs off. We measure change in the shallow subsurface, change in soil moisture and in rock moisture to be about 154 millimeters. And so there's about, on an annual basis, there's about 42 millimeters that is either stored from one season to the next, or it's fluxing down through deeper channels through the fractured weathered bedrock and arriving at the ontoplane below. So we're basically missing that amount that's not running off, or it's not accounted for in terms of the amount of water that the vegetation is fluxing back to the atmosphere. So we have an idea from this is in terms of how much water comes out of the Ramachaka, and also the timing of when that flow happens, which is useful for planters down in Zerite to allocate water resources, or perhaps to build small reservoirs to hold water through the wet season so it's available for use during the dry season. So looking at the upper part of the watershed, we can divide that watershed into different parts of land cover, different types of land cover. And here we're showing in the upper Ramachaka, about 11.5% of the watershed is covered in bofedales. So again, these bofedales are these organic rich peatlands, and they're underlain by thick clay deposits. And so this little video here shows what they look like. So you can see that there's water that's coming out, and it's coming out along this boundary between the peat, and then below the peat is clay. And so the clay has very low porosity, and it's forcing the water out, and it's also moderating how quickly the water leaves this landscape. So both the peat is an important part as a sponge for storing water, and then the clay you can think of as like a valve that controls how quickly that water leaves the landscape. And that's important because in a seasonally dry landscape, if all that water just left during the wet season, there wouldn't be water to sustain streams during the dry season. So another part of what we've done, and this is working with our collaborator, Christina at Rutgers University, is we've used a variety of geophysical techniques to basically probe the subsurface. And the idea here is we want to understand what the structure of the subsurface is and how much water is being stored in different rock types below the subsurface, and trying to basically understand what the lower boundary is of the weathered rock zone that can store water. So we have these seismic lines that we've conducted across the upper Ramachaka watershed, and we're carrying big sledgehammers, we're carrying lots of geophysical equipment, and all of this is up at about 15,000 feet above sea level. So it's a lot of work, but we have teams of students and volunteers from the community that help out. And so what we do is we swing this hammer and against this steel plate, and what we're doing is creating a small earthquake or small seismic vibration that then we can measure the refraction of those seismic waves through the subsurface of the mountain. And so these are some of the results. And what we're showing here for lines 3 and 4 is the seismic velocity. And so if a velocity is higher, that means that the rock is denser, more compact, and has less fractures. If the velocity is lower, that means the rock is more broken up and it has more capacity to hold moisture. And so one of our goals, or primary goal, is understanding where water is held on this landscape. And what we see from these two images is that generally up on the ridge tops, there's a thick zone where there's low velocity material. And so that means that there's a thick reservoir, or potential reservoir to store water. And then as we move down towards the flat areas where the bofedales are, the higher velocity materials closer to the subsurface. And so we interpret this as, the gray bars are showing where the bofedales are. And we interpret this as there's water falling on the hill slopes that is stored in the hill slopes, and it's being forced up towards the surface by this high velocity, low porosity bedrock. And so that's basically creating these areas where water collects and wetlands can start to grow. Looking at those wetlands in a little bit more detail, these are data combining direct measurements from using a hand auger just to drill down into the bofedal, and then also using seismic equipment to determine what the water content is and the conductivity is of the material in that subsurface. So we find that this is showing from two different profiles. And what this is showing is water content. This is the volume of water per volume of material in the subsurface. And in the upper part, we can see that the volume of water divided by the volume of material is almost 1. So in those peatlands that are saturated, it's almost 100% water. There's very little peat or material that's there. So it's spongy. When you walk on it, it kind of bounces up and down. But if you were to take a sample of that and stick it in the oven, you get almost nothing back. It's just a small amount of organic material that is swollen with water. And then below that, we go into this saturated clay that has a much smaller water content, and that's that valve that's important for releasing water slowly and not allowing that water to leave too quickly. So this is 2 different rock types, siltstone and mudstone. What we've done also working, this is Wilner, here is his name. He's a graduate now of the university in Cusco, and he's been helping us to take measurements of discharge or measurements of flow in the central and the eastern basin of the upper Ramachaka watershed. And so we have a gauging station that's set up here where we're taking continuous measurements of both rainfall and then of runoff, so the amount of water leaving the landscape. And last year, at the beginning of the dry season, we started taking measurements about every month during this decline in runoff in the upper Ramachaka watershed. And what we wanted to do here, again, is get back to what parts of this landscape are more important for releasing water or sustaining flow during the dry season. And if you take one of these measurement points, so each of these red dots is a discharge measurement point where Wilner took a measurement of flow in the stream. If you take the area that contributes to that measurement point and you divide and you identify the portion of that area that's covered in bofedales, so those are these pink areas showing the bofedales in that sub-basin. What we're doing is we're measuring discharge, and we have the area contributing to that discharge, and then we have the area of bofedales within that area. And so what I'm going to show here is a plot of the runoff. And runoff we define as this discharge divided by the contributing area. So it's the flow scaled by what's the area that's contributing to that flow in terms of the watershed area. And then I'm going to plot that against the percent of that contributing area that's covered in bofedales. So that would be the pink divided by the blue in terms of an area divided by an area. So what we find is that this is down here, the percent of that subbasin covered in bofedal. So what is the proportion of a contributing area that's covered in these peatlands? And then this runoff, this is how much water is coming from that subbasin. And so from June to October, at all of our sites, we see that larger proportions of a subbasin that are covered in the bofedal will yield more water. They have more water coming out of them. And from June to October, we see there's this decline in all of our sites from blue to red. And so that's this is days since the beginning of the dry season, which is approximately mid-May. So as we progress through the dry season from blue to red, flow is dropping in all of our sites. And that makes sense because we're going into the dry season. But the relationship is maintained in which those poor portions of the landscape that have more bofedales are yielding more water to the stream. And so these bofedales, these sponges, are really important for sustaining that flow in the stream throughout the dry season and for downstream water users in Zarique. So some impacts on the students. This is another component. So we talked a little bit about the science. Few words on impacts of the students, and then I'll give a couple pictures of the impacts to the community and the canal. So here's a few pictures on the right showing from last summer field work here, and then a trip to PSAC with the students to see Inca ruins. And then here showing Wyeth, who's a master's student working with me at the American Geophysical Union Fall Conference last December, and then 2 other students who are presenting a poster on this work. So just some quotes from the students about the impact that the experience has on them in terms of solidifying or broadening their perspective, what an engineer's job is, rethinking an approach I want to take to grad school, and wanting to pursue a career in water resources. and then broadened my horizons immensely, made me realize I can do meaningful work in almost any part of the world while still doing something I enjoy. And then just a list of some presentations that I've made, and then more importantly, the presentations that students have made at scientific conferences. And so really we were wanting to cultivate this sense of leadership and environmental stewardship in students and connect them with their peers in other parts of the world so that they can realize that they have similarities and build future collaborations to solve these environmental problems or to work on environmental problems that really don't know frontiers in terms of national frontiers. They're global problems that require collaborative solutions. In the community, as I said at the beginning, the canals were just completed. So these pictures actually on the right here, I just received last night from my colleague Tomas, who you'll hear from in just a second, who's in Zurite. And so these irrigation canals serve over 100 families. You can see this box here, this is to break the pressure to sort of regulate the flow so it doesn't get too high. And then this is from last fall, the construction of the canal. So we collaborated with the municipality, the community, and basically the farmers union there, putting in equal amounts with our organization and their 3 organizations to construct these canals, and they were just completed last month and are in use. And now I just want to play this brief video of Tomas just talking about the importance of the program. So we had a few students who came with us last year who were film students, and hopefully they'll finish making this film. I think they're still working on it, but this is a clip, and I put in my own subtitles down at the bottom. This is Tomas, who's my friend and our collaborator in Zurite.
Ese espíritu generoso, ese espíritu solidario, que tal vez nosotros no vamos a devolverles, pero sí en ustedes debe quedar esa gran satisfacción de ayudar a un pueblo. Muchas gracias. Me he puesto muy emocionado.
And thank you. So I'll answer any questions if you have any.
So do we have any questions out there? We could either use the chat feature just to call on you, or if people have figured out how to raise your hand, or even just raise your hand like that. Howard.
Jasper, how is this project funded? And are you a part then of actual implementation of the research to irrigation projects for the valley?
So the project has been funded by Geoscientists Without Borders. And that project, the funding for that project just ended. We just finished the canal and we have no more money left in that grant. And we are waiting to hear from National Science Foundation about the potential to extend this work. But if we do get that grant, that will help to fund students and to fund the science, but it'll be less in terms of direct monetary contribution. And then in terms of the irrigation, Margaret Lang, who's a collaborator on this project, or another lead on this project, who's at Humboldt State here, she has been working on designing some of the irrigation. And then their engineers in Zurite really know how to design those canals. And so we've been support for them, but they really know what they're doing. So our contribution more to the actual construction of the canals has been more monetary than has been scientific. We plan on publishing our results in scientific journals, and then I've also shared an update with the community that's written in more plain language about some of our findings in the upper part of the watershed that the community can use for planning purposes. And then in the community, there is a growing desire to use different types of irrigation techniques that we might be able to help out with. So for example, sprinkler systems. There's a growing understanding that water needs to be conserved, and sprinkler systems are more efficient than flood irrigation. And so Margaret helped to design a part of a sprinkler irrigation system, and I think that that's another possible project we could do, is to expand use of sprinkler systems or to help design and construct a reservoir to hold water.
Thank you. It looks like Carol had her hand raised, but I don't know if she took it down. Do you still have a question, Carol?
Yeah, I do have a quick question. You mentioned that you were planting trees or trees have been planted to reduce erosion, and it looked like, is that landscape historically had trees, or it seems like
Yeah.
unusual?
It's a great question. We don't actually know in terms of how far back that landscape might have had trees. In an adjacent valley or canyon that's just a little bit to the east of the watershed we're working in, there are native trees there. They're Cavennia is the native name, and they're beautiful trees. They're Polylepis is the genus, I think, and they really grow at the limit of where trees can grow. And they can be about 10 feet tall, but they don't usually grow much beyond that. And so trees can grow there. I don't know for sure whether or not they have ever been in our specific watershed, but probably. And there've been people there for so long, they're probably, the trees were removed for firewood and then opened up for grazing. And so one of the things we were interested in we might get to down the road, but probably not in the next year or so, but really looking at what the effect of these growing trees might be on that water balance. So I showed the precipitation, the evapotranspiration going out, and then the discharge going down to the stream into the community below. If you plant trees where grasslands used to be, that may change the water balance and may lead to more or less water being delivered to the stream in the community below. So that's something that we'd like to explore more, but we haven't got there yet.
Do we have any other questions out there? Well, thank you, Jasper, so much for your presentation. Fascinating to see what's happening out there with the watershed. So grateful. So we do have a tradition to thank our presenters for their time, and so thank you for coming this morning on your behalf. We've made a donation to the Wheelchair Foundation. Just as a typical Rotary tradition, thank you so much for coming and joining us this morning. So.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate everybody listening to learn a bit more about our project and your interest. And thanks for being flexible and setting things up via Zoom.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So something I typically, as another tradition, do at the beginning is to look for guests and visiting Rotarians. I love seeing some new faces out there, and I think I want to call out Taylor at this moment and see if he doesn't mind introducing who his special guests this morning.
Yep. Hey, this is Merrick right here, and Marina, you want to say hi?
Hi.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Yep, we've got two special guests enjoying the show.
And looks like the Coriels just got a new guest.
Mommy, Daddy said I could watch Wonder Woman on the
Yes. Thanks for joining us. Who's your special guest there? Jennifer or Bryn?
This is Colin. He's 5.
Good morning, Colin.
There's going to be a pretty good photo of Colin, who is our coworker right now, for next week.
Very cool. And then I think I wanted to hold on to tradition here. I was looking for Stephanie, but she might have already left us here. But she'll soon be passed. Her information will be coming around or circulating here soon, so she can join us in the future as a prospective member. But
she's here.
Yeah.
Oh, there she is. Yeah. Thanks for coming. Well, so moving on to the raffle, Nick.
All right, the pot today is $60, or, well, you guys saw the email, so So we're gonna draw one name. You're gonna win the blue ball, or you're either gonna win the $5. But either way, today, if you win just $5, then the split between the club and Vanessa is $100. So we'd get $50 each. But if the blue ball is drawn, Vanessa will get the 60, and the winner gets the gift certificate. So let's see. We had 21 entries today. That's the highest.
Hey.
Let's see.
Thank you, everybody.
Patty's the winner today. Let's see. $5. So Patty will send you $5, and Vanessa will do the split with you.
Put it in the backpack fund, please.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Well, thanks again for joining me today, this Friday. We'll send out an updated schedule for the following week, since we will have a meeting on Friday next week, and then Fireside's the following week. So everybody be safe out there. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch you next time.